Billionaire Tycoon sees a poor woman with a baby, then realizes the child looks just like his son. Before starting this story, I'd like to take a moment to ask for your help. If you enjoy the stories we share, please help the channel reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. I'd be very happy if you could subscribe. Without further delay, let's dive into this emotional story. The November rain drummed against the windows of Marcus Whitfield's black Mercedes as it crawled through downtown Seattle traffic. At 52, Marcus had built an empire from nothing. Whitfield Industries now employed over 15,000 people across the Pacific Northwest. His steel-gray eyes, the same ones that had intimidated countless boardroom opponents, stared impatiently at the gridlock ahead. "Sir, there's been an accident up ahead. We might be here for 20 minutes. His driver, James, apologized through the intercom. Marcus loosened his Italian silk tie and reached for his phone to call his ex-wife, Catherine. Their son Daniel had been acting out lately, skipping classes, at his private academy, getting into fights. At 17, Daniel seemed determined to rebel against everything Marcus had worked to provide. "Still stuck in traffic, I assume?" Catherine's crisp voice carried that familiar edge of disapproval. "Yes." "How was Daniel today?" "The same. He barely spoke at dinner, locked himself in his room. Maybe if you actually came home before midnight occasionally." "Catherine, please, not today." As they argued, Marcus noticed a young woman standing at the bus stop just outside his window. She couldn't have been more than 25, wearing a thin denim jacket that did little against Seattle's autumn chill. In her arms, she held a baby wrapped in what looked like a hand-knitted blanket. The child's face was turned toward the street, and something about the baby's profile made Marcus pause mid-sentence with Catherine. The traffic began moving, but Marcus found himself craning his neck to get another look. The baby had the same distinctive cleft in his chin that Marcus carried, the same one Daniel had inherited. It was probably just coincidence. Many people shared similar features, but as his Mercedes pulled away, Marcus couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had settled in his chest. "Marcus, are you listening to me?" Catherine's voice snapped him back to the call. "Sorry, what were you saying?" "I said Dr. Peterson wants to meet with both of us next week about Daniel's behavior." Marcus watched the bus stop disappear in his side mirror. The young woman was still there, gently bouncing the baby as rain began to fall harder. Something about her patient, protective stance reminded him of his own mother, who had worked 2 jobs to keep food on their table when he was growing up in Portland's roughest neighborhood. "Marcus?" "Yes, fine, schedule it." He ended the call abruptly. That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse office overlooking Elliott Bay, but he couldn't focus on the quarterly report spread across his mahogany desk. The image of that baby's face kept returning to him. He tried to rationalize it. Stress from work, concern about Daniel, the anniversary of his father's death approaching. But deep down, a voice he'd been ignoring for months was growing louder. 2 years ago, there had been Emma. Sweet, intelligent Emma Rodriguez, who had worked as a translator for one of his international contracts. Their brief relationship had ended when she'd moved back to Los Angeles to care for her sick mother. She'd tried to call him several times after that, but Marcus had been consumed with a major acquisition and hadn't returned her calls promptly. Eventually, they'd stopped altogether. Marcus walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows and stared down at the city lights reflecting off the wet streets. Somewhere out there, a young woman was probably putting a baby to bed in circumstances far different from his son's privileged life. The thought disturbed him more than he cared to admit. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Emma's number, still saved after all this time. His finger hovered over the call button for several long minutes before he finally set the phone down. Some stones, he told himself, were better left unturned. But as he tried to sleep that night in his king-sized bed overlooking the Sound, Marcus Whitfield couldn't escape the feeling that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. Marcus couldn't concentrate the next morning during his board meeting. The quarterly projections that usually commanded his full attention seemed trivial as his mind wandered back to the bus stop. Finally, he excused himself early, claiming he needed to review contracts. Instead, he found himself driving the same route from the previous day, The bus stop stood empty in the gray morning light, but Marcus parked across the street anyway, feeling slightly ridiculous. What was he doing? Stalking random strangers because of a fleeting resemblance? His phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dad, can we talk tonight? It's important." The message surprised him. Daniel rarely initiated contact anymore. Marcus started to reply, then noticed movement at the bus stop. The same young woman appeared, pushing a worn stroller this time instead of carrying the baby. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the careful way she maneuvered around the puddles, protecting the child from the elements. This time, he got a better look at her face. She was Latina, with long, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her clothes were clean but clearly secondhand, a faded University of Washington sweatshirt and jeans with patches at the knees. Despite her obvious financial struggles, she moved with quiet dignity, occasionally bending down to adjust the baby's blanket or whisper something that made the child's tiny hands reach upward. Marcus's chest tightened. The baby was definitely mixed race with features that could easily blend Marcus's European heritage with Latin American ancestry. The timing would be about right if Emma had been pregnant when she'd tried to contact him. The bus arrived, and Marcus watched as the woman struggled to collapse the stroller while holding the baby. No one offered to help her as she juggled both child and stroller up the bus steps. The sight made something angry and protective flare in Marcus's chest. That afternoon, he did something he'd never done in his 15-year career as CEO. He delegated his remaining meetings and left the office early. He drove to the University of Washington campus and parked outside the registrar's office. It took 3 different departments and his considerable influence to finally get confirmation that Emma Rodriguez had indeed been enrolled in graduate courses there 2 years ago, studying international relations. The address they had on file was for an apartment building in the Central District, one of Seattle's rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. Marcus drove there as the afternoon light faded, his heart pounding with an intensity he hadn't felt since his first major business deal. The high building was a converted warehouse probably built in the 1920s, with exposed brick and minimal maintenance. Marcus climbed 3 flights of narrow stairs, noting the cooking smells from various apartments, cumin, garlic, something that reminded him of the Mexican restaurant Emma had loved. Apartment 3B had no nameplate, but he could hear a baby crying softly inside. He raised his hand to knock, then froze. What would he say? What if he was wrong? What if he was right? The crying stopped, replaced by a woman's voice singing a Spanish lullaby. Marcus recognized the melody. Emma used to hum it while she worked. His hand trembled as he finally knocked. 3 soft raps that seemed to echo through the hallway. Footsteps approached the door, then stopped. He could sense someone looking through the peephole. "Who is it?" The voice was older than he remembered. Wearier, but definitely Emma's. "Emma, it's Marcus Whitfield." A long silence followed, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened just wide enough to reveal Emma's face, and Marcus's breath caught. She looked tired, thinner than he remembered, but her dark eyes still held the same intelligence that had first attracted him. Behind her, he could hear the baby making soft cooing sounds. "Marcus." She said his name like it was something she'd been practicing saying, or maybe something she'd been trying to forget. "What are you doing here?" "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, "and I think you know what it is." Emma's eyes filled with tears she clearly didn't want him to see. She opened the door wider, and for the first time, Marcus saw the baby. Clearly, the child was sitting in a bouncy seat wearing a onesie with cartoon dinosaurs, and there was no mistaking it. The baby had Marcus's cleft chin, his nose, even the way his ears were set. "Her name is Sophia," Emma said simply. "She's 8 months old." Marcus did the math quickly. The timing was perfect. He looked from the baby to Emma, seeing in her face a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and something that might have been relief. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. Emma's laugh was bitter. "I tried, Marcus. I called you 17 times. Emma stepped back to let Marcus into the small apartment, and he was immediately struck by how different this world was from his penthouse. The living room and kitchen were combined into one space, with a futon that clearly doubled as Emma's, bed pushed against one wall. Despite the cramped quarters, everything was spotlessly clean and organized. Children's books were stacked neatly on a crate that served as a coffee table, and Sophia's toys were arranged in a plastic basket near the window. Sophia babbled happily from her bouncy seat, completely unaware of the tension filling the room. Marcus found himself staring at her, cataloging every familiar feature. She had Emma's warm brown skin and dark hair, but the shape of her eyes, the set of her mouth, those were unmistakably his. "Would you like some coffee?" Emma asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It's not the expensive kind you're used to, but—" "Emma, please." Marcus turned away from Sophia to face her. "Why didn't you keep trying to reach me?" She moved to the tiny kitchen area, keeping her back to him as she filled a kettle with water. "Because I have some dignity left, Marcus. After the 3rd week of leaving messages with your assistant, I got the message loud and clear. But I never—" Marcus stopped. He remembered now. Jennifer, his assistant at the time, had been screening his calls aggressively during the Meridian acquisition. She'd been instructed to only put through urgent business matters. "I never got the messages, Emma. I swear to you." Emma turned around, and Marcus could see the skepticism in her eyes. "It doesn't matter now. It matters to me." Marcus glanced at Sophia, who was reaching for a stuffed elephant just out of her grasp. Without thinking, he moved closer and handed it to her. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, and Marcus felt something profound shift in his chest. "She's beautiful. She's everything to me." Emma's voice was fierce with protectiveness. "We're doing fine on our own." Marcus looked around the apartment again, noting details he'd missed before. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the neighbor's television. The radiator in the corner was old and probably inefficient. Emma's laptop sat on the small dining table, surrounded by textbooks and what looked like freelance translation work. "You're still in graduate school?" "Online now, part-time. It's taking longer than I planned, but—" Emma shrugged. "I'm making it work." "What about childcare? Support?" Emma's jaw tightened. "I manage. There's a woman down the hall, Mrs. Chen, who watches Sophia when I have to meet clients in person. Most of my work I can do from here." Marcus watched Sophia gnaw contentedly on the elephant's ear and felt an overwhelming surge of guilt and protectiveness. His daughter, because there was no doubt in his mind now that she was his daughter, was growing up in circumstances he could easily change. Meanwhile, his son Daniel lived in a mansion but seemed more lost than ever. "I want to help," he said quietly. "We don't need charity." "This isn't charity, Emma. She's my daughter." The words hung in the air between them. Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't look away. "You have another son," she said. "A family, a whole life that doesn't include us. My marriage ended 2 years ago. Catherine and I are divorced." Marcus sat down on the floor near Sophia's bouncy seat, ignoring the expensive suit he was wearing. "And Daniel, he's struggling, has been for months." Sophia dropped her elephant and looked up at Marcus with wide, curious eyes. When he smiled at her, she smiled back, revealing 2 tiny bottom teeth. The simple exchange nearly broke his heart. "I need to know everything," Marcus said, looking up at Emma. "The pregnancy, the birth, what you've been through. All of it." Emma moved to sit on the futon, pulling her knees up to her chest in a gesture Marcus remembered from their time together. She looked so young, so vulnerable, and yet so strong. "I found out I was pregnant about 2 weeks after I moved back to LA, she began. "My mother was in the final stages of cancer, and I was trying to care for her while finishing my thesis. When I couldn't reach you—" She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I decided I could handle it alone." "Your mother?" "She died when I was 6 months pregnant. She never got to meet Sophia, but she knew about her. She was excited about becoming a grandmother." Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. After the funeral, I realized I couldn't afford to stay in LA. I had friends here, and Seattle has better job prospects for translators. Marcus thought about his own life 2 years ago, the acquisition, the divorce proceedings, his focus on building wealth and power while Emma was struggling alone with their child. The weight of his absence felt crushing. "I should have been there," he whispered. "Yes," Emma said simply. "You should have." Sophia began to fuss, and Emma immediately got up to lift her from the bouncy seat. As she settled the baby against her shoulder, Marcus could see the easy competence of a mother who'd been managing alone from the beginning. The sight filled him with both admiration and regret. "What happens now?" Emma asked, swaying gently with Sophia. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and knew his answer with absolute certainty. Now everything changes. Before continuing with the story, I'd like to take a moment to ask for your help. If you're enjoying this story, please help the channel reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. I'd truly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Now, back to the story. The next morning, Marcus canceled his breakfast meeting with the mayor and instead found himself at a 24-hour grocery store at 6 a.m., filling a cart with baby supplies. He'd spent the night researching everything from organic baby food to the safest car seats. His usual business acumen now focused entirely on his daughter's needs. When he arrived at Emma's apartment building carrying bags of groceries and baby items, she met him at the door with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Marcus, this is too much," she said, watching him stack diapers and formula on her small counter. "It's not nearly enough." He'd also brought a check, folded in his jacket pocket, but something told him to wait for the right moment to offer it. "I missed 8 months of her life, Emma. Let me help now." Sophia was in her high chair, messily eating what appeared to be mashed bananas. When she saw Marcus, she banged her plastic spoon excitedly on the tray, sending banana flying across the small kitchen. Emma moved to clean it up, but Marcus was already there with a paper towel. "She's got quite an arm," he said, wiping banana off the cabinet. "She's going to be trouble, I can already tell." Emma's smile was the first genuinely warm one Marcus had seen since he'd reappeared in her life. As if to prove her point, Sophia threw her spoon on the floor and clapped her hands, delighted with the noise it made. Marcus bent to pick it up, and when he straightened, Sophia reached for him with sticky fingers. "Can I?" he asked Emma. She nodded, and Marcus carefully lifted Sophia from her high chair. She immediately grabbed at his tie, her small fingers surprisingly strong. For a moment, Marcus just held her, breathing in that particular baby smell of innocence and possibility. This was his daughter. The realization hit him fresh each time, like a wave he couldn't prepare for. His phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dad, you said we could talk today. Are you coming home?" Marcus looked at the message, then at Sophia in his arms, then at Emma cleaning up the breakfast mess in her cramped kitchen. 2 children, 2 completely different worlds, both needing him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I need to tell Daniel about Sophia," he said. Emma's hands stilled on the dishcloth. "Are you sure? This is all happening very fast." "He's her brother. He has a right to know." Marcus bounced Sophia gently as she continued to explore his tie. "Besides, he's been asking to talk to me. Maybe this is what he needs. To know he's not alone, that family can be bigger than just the 3 of us who disappointed each other." That afternoon, Marcus brought Daniel to meet Emma and Sophia. His 17-year-old son had grown taller since Marcus had really looked at him, all angles and attitude, with the same dark hair Marcus had at that age, but none of his confidence. Daniel slouched in the passenger seat of Marcus's car, earbuds in, pointedly ignoring his father's attempts at conversation. "Danny, I need you to listen to me for a minute," Marcus said as they parked outside Emma's building. "It's Daniel, not Denny, and what's so important it couldn't wait until tonight." Marcus turned off the engine and faced his son. "You have a sister, a baby sister. We're going upstairs to meet her." Daniel pulled out his earbuds, staring at his father with a mixture of confusion and anger. "What are you talking about? Mom didn't say anything about..." Not with your mother, with someone else, someone I cared about very much. Marcus chose his words carefully. Her name is Sophia, and she's 8 months old. You cheated on Mom. Daniel's voice was sharp with accusation. Your mother and I were already separated when I met Emma. The divorce just wasn't final yet. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. And you're just finding out about the baby now? It's complicated. Marcus didn't want to get into the details of missed messages and failed communication. The important thing is that she's here, she's ours, and she needs you maybe. I didn't ask for this. But when they climbed the 3 flights of stairs to Emma's apartment, and Sophia looked up from her playmat to smile at the new face, something in Daniel's expression softened. Emma had been nervous about the meeting, but she greeted Daniel with the same quiet dignity she showed everyone. She looks like Dad, Daniel said after studying Sophia for several minutes. Same stubborn chin. She's got his appetite too, Emma said. And his temper when she doesn't get what she wants fast. Enough. Daniel surprised everyone by sitting down on the floor next to Sophia's playmat. She immediately crawled toward him, babbling in the nonsensical but earnest way babies do when they're trying to communicate. When she pulled herself up using his jeans as leverage, Daniel instinctively steadied her. Hey there, Sophia, he said softly. I'm your big brother. Marcus felt his throat tighten as he watched his children meet for the first time. Sophia seemed fascinated by Daniel's teenage energy, reaching for his face with curious fingers. Daniel, meanwhile, looked more relaxed than Marcus had seen him in months. She's actually pretty cool, Daniel admitted, letting Sophia grab his finger. But this place is really small, Dad. Like, really small. Emma stiffened at the implicit criticism, but Marcus saw something else in Daniel's comment. Not judgment, but concern. Your father has been very generous with supplies, Emma said carefully. That's not what I mean. Daniel looked up at Marcus. I mean, she's family, right? Family doesn't live like this when they don't have to. Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. His 17-year-old son had cut straight to the heart of what Marcus had been struggling to articulate. That love wasn't just about providing support from a distance, but about truly sharing life. Daniel's right, Marcus said, looking at Emma. We need to talk about the future, all of us together. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus watched his 2 children play together on Emma's small living room floor and began to imagine what their future might look like. Not as separate worlds occasionally intersecting, but as one family, complicated and unconventional, but real. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the living room of a spacious townhouse in the Wallingford neighborhood, watching as professional movers carefully arranged Emma's few possessions in rooms that had previously stood empty. The house was a compromise, not as lavish as his penthouse, but comfortable and safe, with a fenced yard where Sophia could eventually play. Emma had initially refused his offer to help her move, just as she'd refused the check he'd tried to give her. But when Sophia had come down with a respiratory infection that required urgent medical care, and Emma's health insurance proved inadequate, she'd finally allowed Marcus to help, not just with the medical bills, but with creating a more stable life for their daughter. The nursery looks perfect, Daniel said, appearing in the doorway with Sophia in his arms. Over the past few weeks, he'd become an unexpectedly devoted big brother, spending afternoons at Emma's old apartment doing homework while she worked, entertaining Sophia with an endless patience that surprised everyone, including himself. Marcus looked into the sunny room they'd converted for Sophia, with its pale yellow walls and carefully chosen furniture. Through the window, he could see the neighborhood park where families walked their dogs and children played on well-maintained equipment. It was the kind of setting he'd always imagined for his children, safe, nurturing, full of possibilities. She's going to love having a yard, Emma said, joining them. She looked tired but more relaxed than Marcus had seen her since he'd re-entered her life. The constant stress of managing alone with inadequate resources had been wearing on her more than she'd admitted. And you'll be able to finish your degree without worrying about childcare, Marcus added. Emma had enrolled Sophia in an excellent daycare center near the University of Washington, where she could complete her graduate program in international relations. Marcus had offered to pay for a full-time nanny, but Emma had insisted on maintaining some independence, some sense that she was still building her own life rather than simply being rescued. Sophia babbled happily in Daniel's arms, reaching for the mobile hanging over her new crib. She'd grown so much in just 3 weeks, not just physically, but in her awareness of the world around her. Having Daniel around had given her a new playmate, and having Marcus as a consistent presence had brought a stability that showed in her increased confidence and curiosity. "Dad," Daniel said, settling Sophia in her crib with practiced ease, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "Maybe I should defer college for a year, help out more with Sophia, maybe travel with Emma when she gets her degree and starts working internationally. I mean, I don't really know what I want to study anyway, and Sophia won't be this little forever." Marcus and Emma exchanged glances. Daniel's grades and attitude had improved dramatically since Sophia had entered his life. Having someone who needed him, someone he could protect and guide, had given him a sense of purpose that all of Marcus's lectures about responsibility had failed to instill. "That's generous of you, son. But you don't need to put your life on hold." "I'm not putting it on hold. I'm choosing how I want to spend it." Daniel's voice had a new maturity that Marcus barely recognized. "Besides, Sophia's going to need someone to teach her how to throw a baseball and ride a bike. Someone who isn't ancient like you." "Ancient," Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in the new house in a way that felt like hope. That evening, after the movers had left and they'd ordered pizza from Sophia's new favorite restaurant, the four of them sat in the living room as Sophia played on a blanket spread across the hardwood floor. Marcus watched his daughter discovering the acoustics of her new home, banging toys together and delighting in the different sounds they made. "I keep thinking about something my mother used to say," Emma said, curled up on the couch with her feet tucked under her. "She said family isn't just about blood, it's about showing up, being present when people need you." She was right, Marcus said. He thought about all the years he'd been physically present but emotionally absent from Daniel's life, focused on building wealth instead of relationships. "I'm sorry it took me so long to show up for both of you. You're here now," Emma said. Simply, "That's what matters." Daniel was lying on the floor next to Sophia, letting her grab at his hair while he made silly faces that sent her into peals of laughter. Watching them together, Marcus felt something he'd been chasing his entire adult life without realizing it: contentment. Not the adrenaline rush of closing a deal, or the satisfaction of accumulating more wealth, but the quiet joy of being exactly where he belonged. His phone buzzed with an email from his assistant about tomorrow's board meeting, but for the first time in years, Marcus ignored it. The business would survive without his immediate attention. His family, he'd learned, needed him more than his empire ever had. As Sophia grew sleepy, Emma lifted her for her nighttime routine. Marcus watched his daughter's eyes grow heavy as she was rocked and sung to, and marveled at how completely she trusted the adults in her life to care for her. It was a trust he was determined never to break again. "Thank you," Emma said softly, as she prepared to take Sophia upstairs. "For what? For changing. For choosing us. For proving that people can grow." Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed and Daniel had returned to his mother's house, Marcus sat alone in the living room of the townhouse, listening to the sounds of his daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs. Tomorrow he would return to his penthouse to board meetings and quarterly reports and all the demands of running a corporate empire. But this house, this family, this complicated and beautiful life they were building together, this was where his heart would stay. He'd spent decades accumulating wealth and power, thinking that was what success looked like. Now he understood that success was much simpler and much more precious. It was Sophia's laugh when she saw him walk through the door, Daniel's newfound sense of purpose, Emma's trust that he would keep showing up. Marcus Whitfield had built an empire, but in a cramped apartment on a rainy Seattle afternoon, he'd found something far more valuable. He'd found his way home.